Hello, everyone. Today we'll talk about the position of our hands and our head, and we'll conclude that this is basically depending on the custom and the place. So, if you had a meeting with a city official, um, or if you had a meeting with the governor, or if you had a meeting with the president of the United States, each office will tell you what the correct attire and behavior is in front of these people. Just an example that isn't brought here. If somebody today stands in front of somebody else with his hands sticking out of his pockets, or with his hands folded in front of him in that manner, it would look like somebody is being arrogant and not really caring about the results or the outcome of this meeting, right? If I'm standing with my hands folded over my chest, I'm basically saying I'm in a position that is better than yours, even though you're the more respected person in society. But I don't really care what you think about me. And same, even more so if I'm standing with my hands in my pocket and stuff like that. Basically, the whole idea is that when we're standing before Hashem, we should be more serious, but it really depends on the custom and of the place. And he's going to give us a few historical references. Just one more thing, there's a verse in Micah where Micah actually asks, how am I going to approach Hashem? How am I going to approach the King of all kings? And he says, I can come with bulls and goats, or I can position my body without the goats and the bulls in a bent position, like it's a synonym for ishtachaveh, which is to bow down or to prostrate. But he uses the word ikaf, which today in modern Hebrew we use as a saddle. And there's different reasons for that. One reason is because the saddle itself is actually bent over the body of the horse or the donkey. And the other explanation is because of the word kafa, which is to pressure. And that's based on a verse in Job. So really, modern Hebrew changed slightly things, but we do have the word kafuf, which is bent over, and that's, I think, where the Shulchan Aruch gets that word from. So, when reciting the Amidah must lower his head slightly so that his eyes point downwards in the way of humility. He must imagine himself standing in the temple and directing his heart up towards the heaven. So we're never going to actually see Hashem, but if we bend our eyes downwards, it looks like we are humbling ourselves, because staring somebody in the eye, again, is sometimes a sign of haughtiness and arrogance. The Kabbalist praise one who prays with his eyes closed. However, even a person who looks into his Siddur follows the law of the Chatchila. Many Acharonim recommend praying from Siddur so that one can have more kavanah in his prayer, also because that way, even if you know it by heart, if there's a different nusach going on or something like that, it will be able to concentrate with the Siddur that you are most comfortable with. Regarding one's hands, the Rambam writes in Hilchot Tefillah that a person should place his hands on his heart while interlocked, right over left, so that he stands as a slave before his master in awe and fear. And so that is what the Shulchan Aruch writes, which the Shulchan Aruch was written almost 450 years after the Rambam wrote the Mishneh Torah, and what is explained in the Kavanot of the Ari. The Ari and the Shulchan Aruch lived around the same time in Safed, so that's not surprising. Many maintain that it all depends on the custom of the place. Where the Rambam lived, it was indeed customary to stand before kings and ministers in the manner in which he described. However, people in other areas practice differently. For instance, those living in the countries of Edom. Edom is from the word red, and today people say that Petra and the Red Mountains in Jordan is where Edom was, and it makes a lot of sense. Were accustomed to standing with their arms folded, which today, like I said before, will look like you are not being respectful and not being in awe. And those in the land of Ishmael would stand with their hands behind their backs, to symbolically indicate that they do not even have the use of their hands without the consent of the one before whom they are standing. And that makes a lot of sense. Again, we have different customs today. If any of you went to Bnei Akiva or other youth movements, when they do the misdar, the roll call, the Komunar says Amod Dom, Amod Noach. So when you stand straight, like during the national anthem, you stand with your hands to the side of your body, straight. But when you stand Noach, your legs are slightly parted, and your hands actually are behind your back like this. So even when you are supposed to be Noach, which is comfortable, you still stand in that kind of respectful way. So again, it's always going to change, and it also depends, I think, on the age and the reason for this appointment or meeting. And so nowadays, according to this, in addition to what the Rambam wrote, it is also permissible to stand with one's hands adjacent to his body or slightly resting on a stender directly next to a lectern and for a sitter. For that too is considered standing respectfully. However, one should not stand with his hands in his pockets or on his hips, for it is inappropriate to stand that way in front of respected people, which is what we said before. Maybe one last thing about that. We talked before about not leaning on something so hard that if it was pulled away, you will fall. And for us to bow today, we don't need to hold on to anything if we are healthy people. But of course, we said that if somebody has back problems or leg problems, then they are allowed to do that. And so last but not least, he talks about what we call shuckling. So many people are accustomed to shuckling, swaying back and forth while reciting the Amidah. The Rama writes that this is the proper way to pray the Chatchila in order to express the excitement and trepidation of the prayer experience, and in order to involve one's whole body in the service of prayer, as it is written in Psalms, all my bones will say, Hashem, who is like you? So, just something cute. When COVID first started and people were at home and they couldn't even pray in a minyan, before we started the street prayers and all that, one of my friends in Beit Shemesh did a short video of how you can still exercise while praying, and especially, I guess, during praying. He was showing how you roll the tefillin with your arm, and how you can raise your hands to Hashem in prayer and chuckling and and dancing before Hashem during Hallel. It was really cute, but we do try, even though we're supposed to be in awe and not exactly fear, but this awe. We also have this idea of shuckling. But if it is strange, meaning there's people around you that are looking at you like you are from another planet, then of course we shouldn't do it, because it looks like you're enjoying yourself or doing some exercise as opposed to praying to Hashem. By contrast, the Shla writes that one should not chuckle during prayer, but just the opposite, that standing motionless strengthens one's kavanah. Furthermore, he says it is not respectful to chuckle. If a person were to come before a human king and begin to shake with his whole body, indeed, the king would immediately dismiss him. If so, one should certainly not act that way in prayer. The Shla explains that the recommendation to sway specifically applies to Torah learning or to singing songs and praise, which actually works today with psychology. They say that moving your brain slightly by this shuckling actually helps improve your memory. However, in the intense and internal prayer of the Amidah, in which we stand before the king, it is not proper to move at all. Only one's lips may move, as we learned about Chana. Since each minhag has opinions on which to rely, every person may practice in the way that allows him to concentrate the most. This applies especially to a person who became accustomed to shuckling and therefore finds it hard to concentrate while standing still. So I think that, again, it depends on where you're from. It depends if you ever stood in attention in the army or in other kind of situations. I think that for me, it helps me to stand still, to concentrate, because I was in the army for 3 years. But during Torah learning, I do shackle, and especially if I have a shtender, which is really, really great. And we'll stop here.